guys, I'm Sherry and this is Gardening in the North. If you've been enjoying the content that I've been putting out on my videos, then please show me your support by hitting that subscribe button below. It's free and it's easy. And if you're feeling extra generous today, then hit that like button as well. So today we are going to be making homemade barbecue sauce from scratch. The base of my barbecue sauce is going to be made with homegrown tomatoes. So I grew all of these tomatoes this summer in my garden, and as they became ripe, I threw them into these large Ziploc bags and threw them right into the freezer. Now the reason that I threw them into the freezer, a couple reasons I threw them into the freezer, one being that they didn't all become ripe at the same time. And so sometimes when that happens, you don't necessarily have enough tomatoes at that particular time to make a big batch of anything. And let's be honest, making a big batch of anything in the summertime when you're harvesting everything from the garden is quite unattainable. I was so busy this summer that I thought, you know, it's better for me to throw these into the freezer and make something late in the fall, early winter, when we have a day where we just don't want to be outside anyways and we want to be in the kitchen. So the other reason that I throw them into the freezer is to eliminate some of the time that it takes to actually cook these down. So normally if you had fresh tomatoes, you would throw them into a pot and you would simmer them and get them nice and soft, and then you would drain off that extra liquid, put them through a press and start your process. Now, when you freeze them, you don't have to cook them before you put them through the press. So I've essentially saved myself some time in this whole process. And any of you that know, making any kind of homemade barbecue sauce or tomato sauce is a fairly lengthy process because you have to make sure that you do all the steps that are in it to make sure that you end up with a really good product. I pulled out roughly 43 pounds of tomatoes this morning and had them thawing in bowls on my counter. So I'll just show you here. You can see the liquid that is in there. Now, the first time that I pulled out tomatoes and had them thawing on my counter, I didn't think to put them in bowls and there was water everywhere. So if you're going to use this method of freezing your tomatoes in Ziploc bags or any kind of bag really, and you're needing to thaw them in order to preserve them into the product that you want, please remember to put them in bowls or some kind of container, on a cookie sheet, something that's going to collect that liquid, because there will be liquid that comes from it. So I am going to run all 43 pounds of these tomatoes through my tomato press. And this is the one here that I have. So I'll just show you the box. Now, looks like this. So this was $79 at Canadian Tire. And we used it for all 90 pounds of the tomatoes that we did for our tomato sauce, and it worked fabulously. Now this is my mom and dad's press. The press that we had, that we started with, just do our tomato sauce, broke midpoint during doing it. And I had to run over to my parents to grab this one and haven't returned it to them yet. So if you're watching, mom and dad, it is coming back to you after I do this. Okay, so we are going to run these through the press. I'm going to show you what it looks like. Normally what I do is I put the tomatoes in the top here. I run it through this opening here is going to be the seeds and the skin, all that pulp that you really don't want to have in your barbecue sauce. And what I normally do with that is I take it out of there and I put it back in and I go through a second time, because there's still good stuff in there that can be pulled out, so that when your pulp comes through here, or your skin and your seeds come through here, you want it to be more dry so that you know that all the good stuff has come out and you're going to be using that in your barbecue sauce. So I have put all the tomatoes through the tomato press. In fact, I put all of the seeds and the skin through 3 times to make sure that I got everything possible out of those tomatoes for my barbecue sauce. So this is what I have so far. Take a look. So I'm going to let this simmer now for a couple hours. And then I'm gonna add in all of the ingredients that I need to make it taste more like barbecue sauce. I just wanted to mention that you wanna make sure that you're continuously stirring it every, I'm gonna say 5 to 10 minutes. You just wanna come over, make sure that nothing is burning or sticking to the bottom of your pot. The very last thing you want is to ruin it by having even a little part of it burn to the bottom of your pot, because that will give your whole pot of tomato sauce or barbecue sauce, whatever it is you're cooking, a very burnt kind of taste that you're not going to want to use it after that happens. So what I've done here is I actually went and grabbed a metal coat hanger, and we bent it around into a bit of a flat circle, and I have my pot sitting on that just so that my pot isn't sitting directly on the heat. I started off with 43 pounds of tomatoes, and this is all I have for waste. And it's really not even waste, because I'm going to be putting this straight into my compost bin. Now, I ended up putting these through the press 3 times. So originally it was the tomatoes, out came the seeds and the skin, and I put the seeds and the skin back in the press 2 more times because I wanted to make sure that I was getting everything I needed to make my barbecue sauce. One tip I want to mention to you is that if you take your tomatoes, your frozen tomatoes out of the freezer, and hours later they're not as thawed as you want them to be before putting them into the press, you can actually put them in your sink, put some warm water in there, and most likely within about a half an hour, 45 minutes, they will be thawed, and you can put them through your press. Now, I am going to let my pot simmer for another couple of hours. I want to boil off some of the extra liquid that's in there and thicken it up a little bit naturally. And then after dinner, I'm gonna bring you back and show you what I'm gonna add into it to make it my barbecue sauce. Okay, let's add all of the ingredients. Now, if I go too fast for you or you don't catch something, I will put the ingredients list below in the description notes. Okay, so the first thing we're going to add is a whole container of molasses. We're just gonna, so I'm gonna add everything and then stir it up last. Okay, so I'm actually going to just put that on its side and let it run to the bottom so then I can use the rest of it. I'm gonna do 2 cups of brown sugar. I'm going to do an eyeball cup of honey. Okay. I'm going to do smoked paprika, 4 tablespoons. And then chipotle chili pepper, 4 tablespoons. And a bit. Okay, homemade garlic powder. I'm doing 6 tablespoons. Then we have cinnamon. I'm doing 2 teaspoons. And then you want to do roughly a tablespoon of crushed pepper. I always use the crushed pepper instead of just the pre-bought powdered pepper. Okay, then we're going to do 4 tablespoons of Himalayan pink salt, and you can use whichever salt you have. Keeping in mind that once you've added everything, you want to give it a good stir, you want to let it simmer for a little bit longer, and then you want to taste test it to make sure you don't need to add anything else. Okay, we're going to do 2 teaspoons of chili pepper flakes, and then 1 cup of apple cider vinegar, and then again, you want to put in about 1/2 cup to 1 cup of this, which is Dijon mustard. So again, I'm going to eyeball it and basically just put the whole thing in. Okay. And then homemade onion powder, we are doing a full cup of this. Okay, I'm gonna put this. Okay, and then we're going to stir it. I'm going to stir it, make sure everything has been dissolved completely. You don't want any chunks of anything floating around. One thing that I like to do when I do this is use my immersion blender. I'll put it in later just before I'm ready to can it to make sure there aren't any chunks of anything in here. Okay, so I'm gonna let this simmer probably for another hour, and then I'm gonna taste test it once all of the flavors have really started to dissolve and take over this, so it doesn't taste so much like spaghetti sauce, but more like barbecue sauce. Check out how much barbecue sauce I have. This is amazing. I'm gonna have barbecue sauce for the full year before I have to make it again. Now, I do have to tell you 2 things. One, I cheated a little bit on thickening it up. I kept stirring, simmering and stirring, simmering and stirring, and it just wasn't thickening up as fast as I needed it to, because let's be honest here, like I have to go to bed at some time and go to work in the morning. So I did use a mixture of water and cornstarch. Poured that in, gave it a stir, simmered it a little bit more, and it thickened up to the consistency that I wanted. The other thing that I have to tell you is that I made a mistake on my measurements for the chipotle powder. Yikes! When we first tried it, the kick that it had. Now, my husband and I liked it. I'm not sure that the kids would have liked it. So I amended it a little bit with some extra honey and some extra brown sugar. But again, this is what you have to do when you're making something. You have to taste it, see if you like it, and then make adjustments. So that's what we did. Now it is sweet tasting with a slight kick to it. Had it for dinner tonight, and both my boys went back and had seconds. So I think this is a winner. So I'm gonna can it up, get it into the pots, hot water bath it, and then let it sit on my counter, listen to the magical pop, and then put it in the pantry. So exciting. First batch of jars are now in the hot water. I'm just waiting for them to come to a full boil before I can actually push start on the timer. They are going to stay in that hot water for approximately 25 minutes. When the timer goes off, I'll remove the lid, let them sit there for an extra 5, pull them out, and I should start to hear that magic popping noise within 10 minutes of pulling them out. Sometimes it takes a little longer, but it's usually within 10-15 minutes I start to hear that popping noise. Now, let's talk a little bit about how I filled the jars. So I used my funnel. If you don't have a funnel, it is a #1 thing that you absolutely need. That helps you to keep the rim of your jars fairly clean. It also helps you to prevent from getting stuff all over the outside of the jars. Now, after I filled the jar, I wiped off that rim because you want to make sure before you put your lid on it that rim is very, very clean, and so that there isn't anything there preventing a proper seal. I also put my lids in warm water so that the wax on them starts to warm up, it gets a little bit soft, so that when I put them on my jars, they have a good seal almost right away. Now, I didn't use a measuring stick to measure where I was filling my jars to, because I always fill my jars to the very first groove on the top of your jar right before the rim. That's a 1/4 inch from the top, and that's where you need to fill your jars to. So I actually hear the boiling noise. So there we go. Timer's on. 25 minutes. Once that's done, I will pull them out and put another batch in. So the last batch of jars are in the hot water. I have about 20 minutes to go. Then I can wait that extra 5 minutes, pull them out, and head to bed. But one thing that I wanted to point out to you is the jars that I just pulled out of the water have a white powdery film on them. Now, I usually put in a teaspoon or 2 of vinegar into the hot water bath to prevent this from happening, but I forgot to do that today. And so I just wanted to point this out to you, that if this ever happens to you, it's not a big deal. Once the jars cool down, you're just gonna wipe it off. Take a look. Hey guys, so it's a couple days after I made my barbecue sauce video, and I was having some lunch today and added my barbecue sauce to my lunch, and I just thought, you know what, I should really show you what the consistency of my homemade barbecue sauce ended up turning out like. So here it is here. I would say that it's pretty close to the consistency of store-bought barbecue sauce, except that I know exactly what is in here, and the main ingredient came from my garden. I grew the majority of this. This is pretty cool. My kids love it. My son has been adding it to his chicken strips every day since I made it. Every day he's asking me to make chicken strips so that he can dunk it in my barbecue sauce. So you should try this. Thanks for spending time with me.